Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Lots of big things that are breaking this morning and this week. Trump claiming he will be indicted on Tuesday. We don't actually know if that's going to happen, but we will see. And we will talk all about that and the particular case that and charges that may be brought here. We also have a lawyer on to help us understand the legal intricacies of this one, because there's actually a lot of moving parts here. We also have some political fallout already. Ron DeSantis put in a tough bind on this one in particular, because as Florida governor, he would have to be involved in extraditing Trump. So awkward for him, and he hasn't said anything about it yet. We also have some updates in terms of the market. Credit Suisse being acquired by UBS over the weekend. Will that calm fears? And also some really outrageous things that were said by Janet Yellen about exactly who is being backstopped here in terms of the banking sector. Also huge news internationally this morning as Putin and Xi are set to meet. This comes amid a report that the U.S. is opposed to any potential Chinese brokered ceasefire in this conflict. Kind of an outrageous stance there. And we're also looking back at 20 years later after the launch of the Iraq War. And we're going to look at, we look at a lot of villains from the Iraq War debacle. We're actually going to look at some of the courageous heroes. Do a little bit of a different take on that. But before we get to any of that, thank you guys to all of you for the huge response to now having Spotify video. It is really exciting. And as a reminder, it's available for premium subscribers. Saagar, how do the people take advantage of this?
All right, we are sending our existing premium subscribers. We have a handy dandy little graphic that has been made from one of our users. So thank you very much that we will send again to all of you just to make the sign up as easy and as painless as possible. But people are really enjoying having Spotify video there within the app. So it does take a little bit longer to update than the 11 a.m. email that we do send out to everybody. But for those who are worth it, particularly from what I'm hearing from people who live on the West Coast, they're really enjoying it. So anyway, you can take advantage of that full video on Spotify that is right there inside of your app. Don't even have to check your email anymore. Just auto updates on the Breaking Points premium feed. Again, we will send everybody a handy dandy little email again to people for both the existing premiums can do it and for the new ones who want to take advantage. So it's a lot of fun, and I know that people are really enjoying.
BreakingPoints.com to become a premium subscriber so that you can take advantage of all of these things.
There you go. All right, so Donald Trump, is he going to get arrested or not? Kind of dropped a bomb on the people over the weekend.
Yes,
but
he does.
It does really... what we need to do is take a step back. We need to look at the initial claim that Trump has made, and then let's also look at what are these charges, because it has been now so long. I unfortunately am intimately familiar with this case from the time that I covered the White House, the ins and the outs of the details of Stormy Daniels, of the payment that was made to silence her, and then the potential crime, the original investigations, and now the new one, which appears to be facing some legal jeopardy for the former president. But first and foremost, let's put this up there on the screen. So Trump sent out an all caps statement, quote, "Our nation is now third world and dying. The American dream is dead. The radical left anarchists have stolen our presidential election, and with it, the heart of our country. American patriots are being arrested and held in captivity like animals, while criminals and leftist thugs are allowed to roam the streets." Okay, so that's the intro. Then, page 2. Now illegal leaks from a corrupt and highly political Manhattan District Attorney's Office, which has allowed new records to be set in violent crime and whose leader is funded by George Soros, indicate, with no crime being able to be proven and based on an old and fully debunked by numerous other prosecutors fairy tale, the far and away leading Republican candidate and former president of the United States of America will be arrested on Tuesday of next week. Protest, take our nation back. So obviously the major headline is what? He expects to be arrested on Tuesday in connection to this case by Alvin Bragg from the District Attorney's Office in the state of New York, considering the payment to Stormy Daniels, of which we have known that this investigation has been taking place for a while.
Yeah.
So let's all travel back in time and let's try and forget that Michael Avenatti ever existed and say, who is Stormy Daniels? Stormy Daniels was a porn star throughout the 1990s. She had a dalliance with Trump, of which both have effectively admitted to in Lake Tahoe. You can go and read some of the details for that if you would like elsewhere. I'm not going to get into what actually happened that day. Anyway, suffice it to say that they were likely or allegedly intimate on this day. I believe it was in 2000 between the two. And since then, Stormy Daniels, especially after President Trump announced his candidacy, wanted to come forward along with Karen McDougal and others who had had brief affairs with him in order to basically embarrass him during the campaign. And he's trying to either get money for it from tabloids like National Geographic or from Trump
National
himself.
Enquirer.
Sorry, yeah.
National Geographic.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Well, there's certainly some nature going on in there. All right. Step back. National Enquirer. You can tell which one of those I actually read. All right. So National Enquirer, there was an entire case around the way that case was handled, about the payment, about the intimate relations between the National Enquirer and the safe of all of their secret stories that they had and the payoffs that they would.
Catch and kill, we all learned about.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was anyway, interesting in its own right that we all learned a lot about in 2018. The crux of it comes down to this. Stormy Daniels was paid $130,000. This money was paid by President Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, who has since served some time in jail and turned against the former president and actually turned witness against him in this case. In it, he admitted to paying her $130,000. Now, where is the violation here? Well, there were multiple avenues of inquiry on this. Number one, was this a campaign finance violation because it was done in connection with the 2016 campaign? This was alleged at the time. The FEC actually looked into it. This was the initial thought about the way that federal prosecutors would go after Trump while he was president. Ultimately, the federal investigation, the FEC investigation, went nowhere. Now, the New York authorities are looking at this payment in which Michael Cohen was reimbursed this $130,000 by the Trump organization itself.
Right.
That reimbursement and then the subsequent cover-up or possible misrecording or possible recording it not in the way legally that they should have is at the crux of what we are looking at here. The $130,000 hush money payment from 2016. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen from the New York Times. It's actually a decent explainer inside the payoff to the porn star that could lead to Trump's indictment. The crux of the case is going to focus on Article 175 of the New York Penal Law of falsifying business records. A conviction of a felony version of bookkeeping fraud carries a sentence of up to 4 years. To prove that Mr. Trump committed that offense, prosecutors would seemingly need evidence showing he knowingly caused subordinates to make a false entry into his company's records, quote, with the will intent to defraud. For the action to be a felony rather than a misdemeanor, prosecutors need to show that Mr. Trump falsified the business records with the intention of committing, aiding, or concealing a second crime. As in that they would have to prove that the first payment, the initial cover-up, was a crime, and that the knowledge of what they were doing was intentionally trying to cover up a crime to meet the felony statute. That is basically where we are at with the theory of the case. However, the prosecutor faces a wide array of challenges in this. Number one, it requires a very unique interpretation of this Article 175 law, which is not yet brought before New York state law. A judge could toss it out on that regard. Second of all, the intentionality in being able to prove, we've talked a lot here in the past about defamation cases, Krystal. Part of the reason why they're so hard to prove is because you need to prove not only was somebody defaming someone, but that they were knowingly doing so at the time that they knew what they were saying was not true, and that you have to have evidence to show that they knew exactly what they were saying was not true.
So everything that I've read about this, and we're going to have a lawyer in to break down, you know, exactly what the charges are and what the precedent is and all of those things. But this is a novel application of the law. You have two pieces here. Number one, you have basically business fraud, because this payment was recorded as a quote-unquote legal expense to Michael Cohen when, of course, that wasn't really what it was. And then to make it a felony, it was in service of covering up a campaign finance violation. This is the idea, the theory, the legal theory here. And obviously, a campaign finance law, there, first of all, you have to disclose what money, what benefit you're getting to your campaign. And second of all, there are limits on, you know, how much you can receive and who you can receive it from. You can't get it directly from a business, as one example. So the idea here is that the $130,000 hush money payment was really to benefit his campaign. Now, one thing that I will say, there's a lot of people who are saying, this is kind of legally shaky ground, and a weaker case than some of the other things that are out there. For example, the Georgia grand jury. For example, the Merrick Garland special prosecutor-led investigation by Jack Smith, looking at incitement and more specifically on, you know, fake elector schemes, et cetera, with regard to January 6th. And I think, frankly, also from a political perspective, like those are the things that people are more focused on at this point in time versus this old hush money allegation from years ago that we all had to like dig deep into the trenches of our memory to recall all the details of. However, I do think it's worth pointing out, Michael Cohen did spend time in prison for this exact payment.
Yes.
And now he ended up pleading guilty, and it was to charges of lying to Congress and to campaign finance violations with regard to this hush money payment to Stormy Daniels. So it's not like it's crazy to imagine that, you know, this payment was, of course, in service of his campaign, and he did plead guilty to those charges and spend time in prison. And, you know, I'm not one to give Michael Cohen like a ton of credit, but he did make a reasonable point, which is all the people are freaking out or, oh, this is political, et cetera, et cetera. He's like, where were you all when I was being prosecuted for the same shit? Nobody raised a single voice of protest from the right about him being found guilty of the same thing.
Right. Part of the problem, though, is that one of the charges that brought Michael Cohen down was actually perjury. So he actually lied under oath. So that was part of the issue, right? Is that actually was about the subsequent cover of the crime and not the initial payment itself. This is going to focus.
Well, it was both.
Right.
It was lying to Congress and it was the campaign finance violation.
Right. So and that's actually part of the problem, though, is that was a federal charge, the campaign finance charge. That is not the charge actually being brought here. What would be brought here if an indictment were to come? It would be a bookkeeping case. And actually, there is some discussion about which supersedes which, and the fact that the feds decided not specifically to prosecute Trump for this payment on a campaign finance violation in conjunction with the FEC, that this is in a different, almost legal entity entirely. Politically, I don't disagree. I actually think that's a very reasonable case. But that is actually why the divergence of this and where the grounds on which he actually might be prosecuted and indicted and then ultimately convicted. If so, what that would come down to. Is it going to come down to the actual facts of the case itself, or is this going to be political? And the other thing I think that I should note also is about the statute of limitations, because the statute of limitations in this case may also end up becoming something, because bookkeeping fraud has a 2-year statute of limitations in the state of New York and a 5-year one as a felony, both of which normally would have expired for payments made to Mr. Cohen in 2017. But New York law extends the limits to cover periods when a defendant was continuously out of state, as he was while he was living in the White House or while he was at his home in Florida. In addition, during the pandemic, New York's statute of limitations was extended by more than a year. So with those dual extensions, we are at the expiry limit, which is exactly why they're making the determination specifically on this case at this time. I mean, politically, let's zoom out too, because let's also be real. Like, nothing ever is actually done in terms of the law. Like, clearly there's political motivation on all this. Many of these people actually ran on convicting Trump, both from Letitia James to Mr. Bragg and
definitely
others.
Did.
And exactly. I mean, literally ran on. He's like, I'm going to put, New York state law even was changed in order to help them. What was it? Release his tax returns. I think that's one of the only reasons we even have his tax returns. Anyway, these are all ridiculous fights from 2018 or so that have since passed. But within the memory bank and also within the current political calculus, of which we will talk quite a bit about in the Fallout section, I kind of agree with you, Krystal, which is that at the end of the day, if this is the first one that you're going to bring, it really does seem to me one of those where, on the merits, it does not seem like a very difficult case for Trump actually to beat on the merits in court, especially on bookkeeping. Also with the novel interpretation of the law, the fact that nobody's ever been prosecuted like this, you can make a pretty clear case also in the media around, of course, diehard Democrats are going to be behind it, but diehard Republicans too. This isn't like a smoking gun dead to rights case in any interpretation, I think, of which we will also get into with Bradley Moss.
Yeah. I mean, the politics of it, the legal piece is less clear to me just because I'm
not lawyers.
The politics part is more clear to me, which is I think it's a tremendous gift to Trump that this is the first prosecution because I think it is the weakest of the cases. I think it's the case that people care the least about. It
matters the least.
And so, I mean, listen, when I look at it, I'm sort of two minds. On the one hand, novel application of the law, et cetera. On the other hand, like if you or I did some rigged hush money payment in service of a campaign, we would get popped for it. So, I'm sort of two minds there. But in terms of the politics of it is, I think, pretty clear. And we'll get into this more, but you already see Republicans swimming to his defense. I think it also will take, if there are indictments in some of the other cases, which seems fairly likely, there's no time like the first time. The first time packs the greatest punch. And this happens to be the case that he has the most to work with in terms of spinning a public narrative, which you already see him aggressively doing. And so I think it can also take some of the sting out of later charges that might be filed in some of the more clear-cut and frankly more serious cases that he may be implicated in. So, that's kind of how I see this. I think it's very fortunate for him. I don't think it will certainly hurt him at all in the Republican primary. I think it may well help him in the Republican primary. And I don't know that it has an impact really on him, even for a general election. The other piece here is, he says, because of leaks, we know I'm going to be indicted on Tuesday. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing what he said in his own very Trump-like way, with a lot of misspellings, etc. We don't actually know that he is going to be indicted on Tuesday. In fact, it doesn't really look like he is going to be indicted on Tuesday. There's new reporting that there's some other witness they want to testify in front of the grand jury, which may push the timeline out a bit. I think he's referring to, there was a report, I believe, with NBC News saying he could be indicted as soon as early as this week. That doesn't mean a guarantee that it's going to be this week. It just means this is kind of coming to a close and it's going to happen soon. His own aide said that it's not like he had been given a heads up, hey, this is coming Tuesday. So it's not at all clear that this is happening Tuesday. And if anything, I would say it's probably not happening tomorrow. It's probably, you know, maybe a week away, maybe a little more than that. Who knows? In
old Trumpian parlance, we'll see what happens.
Yes.
We've got a great guest standing by, Bradley Moss. Let's get to it.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.